Kerry, one of the things you're worried about or concerned about as an organisation is water quality.
Absolutely, and we're doing a little bit of work on that at the moment, particularly around the issue of E. coli infections with our children and making sure that there's good quality water. You know, you hear a lot about people talking in the media about, you know, the problems of farmers and dirty water, but the reality is that's the same water that we're feeding our families, so we're not going to be looking out for dirty water, you know, and you know, science and research tells us that some of the dirtiest rivers and water in the country are actually in the city rivers, not the rural ones.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to swim just by Woolston there, I don't think.
No, there's some real issues with urban water, and yet we hear more about rural water, and so we're really concerned in making sure that the water levels, the nutrient levels are kept to a minimum, and so we're encouraging people to get involved with Environment Canterbury's latest round of consultation workshops that are coming up the next few weeks around, I think there's sessions in Lincoln and Timaru and I think possibly Amberley, but where they're talking about the water management strategy and about keeping the nutrient levels down and keeping water quality up, because although it's water quality for irrigation, and it's also the same water that's coming in our house wells into our homes and we're feeding to our children and bathing in and cooking our food in and things. So really important to us that there's good water quality. And from a farming perspective, obviously you can't get good results for your crops if you're feeding contaminated, you know, watering it with contaminated water, and you can't make good milk with dirty water, and you can't feed your sheep with dirty water. So water quality is actually a huge issue for rural people. And so we're paying a little bit of attention to that at the moment and encouraging people to be part of the debate and have their say.
When I was a lad on the farm, we had water race water in one tank for the hot water, and we had rainwater full of birds and God knows what else.
I know.
And I got through it all right.
Well, you do survive. I mean, I suppose your system gets used to it if that's what you're used to, but it's not healthy in the long run. And
it probably didn't do us any good, really.
I don't think so. No, and I know, you know, there's a lot of effort by local authorities to get rid of water races and use other, you know, stock water systems. So. And a lot of that's around simple water quality and supply of water, making sure that, you know, there's fair, equal allocations of water. So we'd just encourage people to be part of the debate and to not have entrenched positions, but be open-minded and contribute.
Do many people still use rainwater off the roof?
Yeah, they do. In the more remote areas, it does still happen, and it's always a good backup, particularly for rural folk. When the power goes out in an adverse event, for example, you also lose water, so it's great to have some kind of backup system, such as a rainwater tank.
Now.
More as a reserve, although there are still some who do rely on it a bit more than others,
I was
particularly where irrigation, you know, systems aren't in place yet.
Being smallest in the family, it was me that went into the tank.
Not nice, not nice.
You started no, it's not. Anyway, moving right along. So that's something that you're going to be looking at pretty seriously.
We are looking at pretty seriously, and our main concern obviously is making sure that our children are free from things like E. coli infections from contaminated water.
Now, you wanted to talk about the Domestic Violence Act.
Yeah, that's on the agenda again at the moment. Amy Adams has recently released a discussion paper around how domestic violence legislation could be reviewed, and we've been doing some work on that for a long time, of course. The issues in rural are slightly different. We've got, you know, less access to things such as safe houses and support services. It's not so easy to get hold of someone if something is going wrong. You're a bit isolated, so it's you know, it's quite easy if you want to. If you're of that mind, it's actually very easy to abuse people in rural sectors because of the lack of support. And
it's hidden.
It's very hidden, we can't make the mistake and think that it's all about men abusing women, because there's also the reverse of women abusing men. There's adults versus children. There's also an increasing incidence of people abusing elderly relatives. You know, elder abuse is quite significant, and it's in areas such as financial abuse. You know, spending the inheritance before you've got it, that kind of thing. Particularly people who have power of attorney, kind of actually taking advantage of an elderly mum who doesn't want to say no. Neglect, just popping them away in a restaurant and forgetting about them, those kinds of things. And so there is an incidence there, and just intimidatory stuff, you know, does happen, and that's a real shame. So we're trying to do some work around those areas, looking at how we can better protect people in the rural sector. And another issue there is protection orders. And in a rural setting, it's a little bit different, because if the perpetrator has to leave the property, and they're the worker who the house is allocated to. What happens to the family? Technically they're not entitled to the house, so there's some issues there. But also they've got to come back to work every day, so they're still, there's issues around having a protection order when the person still has to come onto the property to work. So we need to look at that area. And the other area that we're particularly concerned about is ensuring that protection orders in the future include animals. And why that is because there's a lot of evidence from SPCA and MPI animal welfare that animals are used as a way of intimidating the family. It's the threat to injuring the animal. If you don't do what I want to do, the animal will suffer. Particularly at this time of year, in calving and lambing, if you're going to leave, no one's going to be able to feed the calves and lambs and they'll all die, it's all your fault. Those kind of intimidatory things. And so there is an issue there.
Mental cruelty.
The mental cruelty. So we're looking at making sure the protection orders also protect the animals. And it's not just the family pet, it's also farm animals as well.
How the hell do you enforce it?
Very, very difficult, and really relying on the police with protection orders to do that, and also for people to watch out for animal welfare issues such as, for example, cows with broken tails in the shed, those kinds of things, or unexplained injuries on animals, broken limbs, bruising that's unexplained, and that perhaps should ring some warning signs.
You can't rely on a neighbour to come and throw the person you've got the order against off the land either.
No, you can't. It puts them in a very difficult position. So one of the issues for rural is about resourcing, and police resourcing and support for such as women's refuge or other safe houses, or just how you support people, and that's actually going to be quite an issue, and we're going to be doing some work around that issue too.
Well, I wish you well, because it's a thorny old thing to be looking at.
It is, and to think that New Zealand has one of the highest rates of family violence in the developing world. It's actually quite a shame on all of us, really, that that happens. And I think, we all know if things aren't quite right, but if we stand by and do nothing about it, then we're technically allowing it to happen, and we need to be standing up as a community against it and making sure we've got sufficient supports and resources in place to support people so they feel they can ask for help when they need to. And particularly men as well, because men just won't stand up and say, look, hey, I'm being abused by my partner.
Exactly.
And they really need to, because it's heavily underreported.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed.